The Middle East is in turmoil. The Trump administration's decision to slash foreign aid by $40 billion has sent shockwaves through the region. This move, implemented in early 2025, has had a profound impact on long-standing U.S. allies like Jordan, Egypt, and Israel. These countries have relied heavily on U.S. aid for decades. The sudden withdrawal of support has created a dangerous vacuum. Without this critical funding, essential services are at risk. The potential for instability and conflict is growing. The Trump administration argues that these cuts are necessary to reduce wasteful spending. However, critics argue that this short-sighted approach will have dire long-term consequences. They warn that the aid cuts will undermine U.S. influence in the region. They also fear that it will create a breeding ground for extremism and instability. The impact of these cuts is already being felt across the Middle East. Jordan, a key U.S. ally in the fight against terrorism, has been hit particularly hard. The country received over $1.5 billion in aid in 2023. This money was used to support a range of essential services including education, healthcare, and infrastructure projects. The loss of this funding will have a devastating impact on the Jordanian people. The Trump administration's decision to cut aid to the Middle East is a dangerous gamble. It is a gamble that could have far-reaching consequences for the region and the world. The consequences of the U.S. aid cuts are not abstract. They are real and immediate. In Jordan, the construction of the SAFE high school has come to a grinding halt. The project, once a symbol of hope and progress, now stands as a stark reminder of broken promises. The school was designed to provide a quality education to 1,500 students in a region desperate for opportunity. Now the half-built structure serves as a painful testament to the human cost of these cuts. The suspension of the SAFE High School project is just one example of the widespread impact of the aid cuts in Jordan. The construction industry, once a significant source of employment, has been particularly hard hit. Thousands of construction workers have been laid off, leaving families struggling to make ends meet. The ripple effects are felt throughout the economy. The situation is dire. The aid cuts have exacerbated existing economic challenges in Jordan. The country is already grappling with high unemployment and a large influx of refugees from neighboring Syria. The loss of U.S. aid has pushed the country to the brink. The plight of the SAFE high school and the unemployed construction workers underscores the human cost of these policy decisions. It is a reminder that behind the numbers and the geopolitical calculations are real people whose lives are being profoundly affected. The destabilizing effects of the U.S. aid cuts are not confined to Jordan. The entire region is feeling the tremors. In Iraq, a country still struggling to rebuild after years of conflict, the aid cuts have dealt a significant blow to reconstruction efforts. The funding was crucial for rebuilding infrastructure, providing essential services, and fostering economic development. The cuts jeopardized the fragile progress made in Iraq and threatened to reignite instability. In Syria, a country ravaged by civil war, the cuts have further imperiled the lives of millions of displaced people. U.S. aid was a lifeline for Syrian refugees seeking refuge in neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. The cuts have placed an even greater strain on these already overburdened host countries. The humanitarian crisis in Syria has been exacerbated, leaving millions vulnerable and desperate. Yemen, already grappling with one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, has also been plunged further into despair. The U.S. had been a major provider of humanitarian assistance to Yemen, providing food, water, and medical supplies to millions in need. The aid cuts have pushed the country closer to the brink of famine, with devastating consequences for civilian populations. The Trump administration's decision to slash aid to the Middle East has created a ripple effect of instability throughout the region. The cuts have undermined fragile governments, exacerbated humanitarian crises, and sown the seeds of discontent. The consequences of this short-sighted policy will be felt for years to come. The United States' retreat from foreign aid has not gone unnoticed by its European allies. In a worrying trend, several European countries have announced significant reductions in their own foreign aid budgets. The United Kingdom, once a global leader in international development, has slashed its overseas aid budget to its lowest level in over 25 years. This move, driven by domestic political pressures and a shift in priorities towards defense spending, marks a significant departure from the UK's historical commitment to international development. Germany, another major donor of foreign aid, is also considering cuts to its aid budget. The new government, facing pressure to increase defense spending and address domestic economic concerns, is reassessing its foreign aid commitments. This shift in policy reflects a broader trend across Europe, where countries are increasingly focused on their own internal challenges and less willing to shoulder the burden of international development. The Netherlands and France, two other significant European donors, have also reduced their aid budgets in recent years. These cuts, driven by a combination of factors including domestic political pressures, economic constraints, and a perceived ineffectiveness of aid in deterring migration, have further diminished the overall level of foreign assistance flowing to developing countries. The European retreat from foreign aid is a worrying development. It comes at a time when developing countries are facing unprecedented challenges, including climate change, conflict, and poverty. The reduction in foreign aid will have a devastating impact on the lives of millions of people and could undermine decades of progress and development. Section 5. The human cost, healthcare and education in crisis. The consequences of the aid cuts are most acutely felt in the daily lives of ordinary people. In Jordan, free clinics that once provided essential healthcare services to vulnerable populations are struggling to keep their doors open. Staff layoffs and service reductions have become commonplace as clinics grapple with funding shortfalls. The cuts from the US, Germany, the UK, Spain, and the Netherlands have created a perfect storm, leaving healthcare systems in disarray. Education, a cornerstone of development, has also been severely impacted. Schools are struggling to function with reduced resources. Teachers are being laid off, class sizes are ballooning, and essential learning materials are in short supply. The cuts are jeopardizing the future of an entire generation, depriving them of the opportunity to reach their full potential. The U.S. decision to drastically reduce funding for the UN Population Fund has further exacerbated the crisis. This organization plays a vital role in providing reproductive and maternal health care services, particularly in developing countries. The funding cuts have resulted in clinic closures, service disruptions, and shortages of essential medicines and contraceptives. The impact on women's health and reproductive rights has been particularly severe. The human cost of these aid cuts is immeasurable. The cuts have pushed millions further into poverty, deprived them of access to essential services, and eroded their hopes for a better future. The international community has a moral obligation to reverse course and provide the necessary support to those most in need. The aid cuts have created a dangerous vacuum in the Middle East, one that extremist groups are all too eager to fill. With reduced resources for education, healthcare, and economic development, vulnerable populations become susceptible to the allure of extremist ideologies. The lack of opportunity and hope provides fertile ground for recruitment by groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who offer a distorted sense of purpose and belonging. The cuts to security assistance have also heightened the risk of instability and conflict. With less support for their armed forces and security services, countries like Jordan and Iraq are less equipped to counter terrorist threats and maintain stability within their borders. The potential for the resurgence of ISIS and the emergence of new extremist groups poses a significant threat to regional and international security. The Trump administration's argument that the aid cuts are necessary to reduce wasteful spending rings hollow in the face of these growing threats. The cuts have, in fact, made the region less safe, not more. By undermining the ability of governments to address the root causes of extremism, the cuts have created a self-fulfilling prophecy, increasing the likelihood of the very instability they were intended to prevent. The international community must recognize the dangerous nexus between aid cuts, instability, and extremism. Investing in development and security is not just a matter of charity, it is a strategic imperative for a more secure and peaceful world. The consequences of the aid cuts are not confined to the Middle East. The ripple effects are already being felt in Europe as a new wave of migrants and refugees seek a better life. Driven by desperation and fleeing conflict, poverty, and lack of opportunity, men, women, and children are embarking on perilous journeys in search of safety and a brighter future. The irony is not lost on those who point out that European countries, despite historically using aid as a tool to deter migration, are now cutting back on the very programs that could help address the root causes of displacement. The reduction in aid to countries like Jordan and Lebanon, which host large numbers of refugees, has further strained their resources and made it more difficult for them to provide basic services. This, in turn, has pushed more people to flee, seeking refuge and opportunity elsewhere. The migrant crisis has reignited political tensions within Europe, with some countries resisting calls for greater burden sharing and stricter border controls. The lack of a unified European response has exacerbated the crisis, leaving migrants and refugees vulnerable to exploitation, abuse, and human trafficking. The international community must work together to address the migrant crisis in a humane and sustainable manner. This requires a multi-pronged approach that includes addressing the root causes of displacement, providing humanitarian assistance, and creating safe and legal pathways for migration. Failure to do so will have far-reaching consequences for both the Middle East and Europe. The long-term consequences of the U.S. aid cuts to the Middle East are deeply concerning. Experts warn that the cuts will have a lasting impact on regional stability, U.S. influence, and the fight against extremism. The decision to withdraw support from long-standing allies has damaged trust and created a perception of American unreliability. The vacuum left by the U.S. is being filled by rival powers such as China and Russia, who are eager to expand their influence in the region. These countries are offering alternative sources of aid and investment, often with fewer strings attached. The U.S. risks ceding its leadership role in the Middle East to these rivals, with potentially significant geopolitical consequences. The cuts to development assistance will have a lasting impact on human potential and economic progress in the region. By undermining education, healthcare, and economic opportunity, the cuts are perpetuating a cycle of poverty and instability. The lost opportunities for this generation will have ripple effects for decades to come. The Trump administration's legacy in the Middle East will be one of instability, diminished influence, and missed opportunities. The decision to prioritize short-term gains over long-term strategic interests has come at a high cost, one that the region and the world will be paying for years to come. The current situation in the Middle East is dire, but it is not too late to reverse course. The international community must act urgently to mitigate the damage caused by the U.S. aid cuts and prevent further instability. This requires a renewed commitment to diplomacy, development, and security cooperation. The U.S. must restore its funding for foreign aid and re-engage with its allies in the region. This includes providing economic and security assistance to countries like Jordan and Iraq, supporting the education and healthcare of vulnerable populations, and working to resolve regional conflicts. European countries must also step up their contributions to international development and shoulder their fair share of the burden. This includes increasing aid budgets, providing humanitarian assistance to refugees and displaced persons, and working to address the root causes of migration. The international community must work together to counter the threat of extremism and terrorism. This requires a comprehensive approach that includes addressing the root causes of radicalization, such as poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity. It also requires strengthening security cooperation, sharing intelligence, and combating the financing of terrorism. The challenges facing the Middle East are complex and multifaceted, but they are not insurmountable. By working together, the international community can create a more secure, stable, and prosperous future for the region and the world. The time for action is now.